Hi guys, so today I'm going to show you how to make a set of cushions for a campervan, caravan, boat, whatever you want to use them for. This is actually for a horse box. But the cushions will have two insert panels that are diamond stitched and piping as well. I've been supplied the foam by the customer. Sometimes I get supplied foam, sometimes foam and fabric, sometimes I just get supplied measurements and asked to make cushions, but this time it's just the foams. So I've got the foams as a reference of my measurements. So the first thing I need to do is to measure the dimensions of these foams, decide how big I want the panels to be. Now I like to keep my panels in 2-inch increments, so 10 inch, 12 inch, 14 inch. I like to use inches, it just makes my life easier. So I'll take the measurements of these, decide how big each panel is going to be, and then I'll get the fabric out and start to cut everything out. But I'll explain to you exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and if you follow on you should just get the same results that I get within reason. So I'm going to put the backrest foam to one side and take measurements of the seat base foam. Now the foam's 4 inches thick, I think. Yep, 4 inches thick, and it's 52.5 inches long by 19 inches deep. So I'm going to write all these dimensions down. I'm actually going to draw on the foam as well, just makes my life a bit easier when I've got a physical representation of what I'm doing on something. So if this were just measurements, I would maybe draw it out on a piece of pattern plastic, and then you can actually see when you draw it out whether everything looks right. Sometimes the panels might look too big or too small, and sometimes it's harder to actually imagine it when you've just got it down as a measurement. But I'm also going to write it down on a pad as well, just as another reference. 52.5 by 19. And the backrest will be the same length. We'll call that 15 and a quarter. So I'm going to split my 52.5 inches in half, which is 26 and a quarter. I'm going to draw a centre line. It's always nice to have this centre panel here, slightly bigger than the two outside ones. So if I have this at 6 inches, that's 3 inches either side. That will give me 13, 18 inches, quite a big panel that, 18 inches. I'd rather it be 16 inches. So if I go 5 inches there, do 16 inches there, my centre panel now becomes 10 inches. And 10 inches might be a little bit too big, so I'm going to go 5 3/4, 16 inches, and that makes my centre panel 9 inches. I think I'm happy with that. So we've got a 9-inch centre panel, a 16-inch panel with the diamond stitches on, and what did I say it was? 5 3/4. Yeah, happy enough with that. So I'm going to write on the foam. So we've got 9 inches, 16 inches, and 5 3/4 inches by 19 inches. So that's all my measurements now. These same measurements will be used on the backrest, because the backrest has to be the same as the seat base. It's just that the 19 inches changes to 15 and a quarter, but it doesn't really, because on the top or on the base I'm going to cut the pieces out so that only the size of the top. But on the backrest, what I want to do is to bring the fabric around down here. So I need my 15¼ inches plus my 2-inch thickness. Because what I don't want to happen is, if I did my stitched panels and then put a border plain along the edge here, when this sits on top there's a potential that you'll see the border popping through. It's always better to have the fabric going around, so when it's placed on top there, you don't see anything but the matching fabric that's underneath, if you understand what I mean. Once I've made the cushions and I've put them together, I'll show you again and you'll probably understand a little bit better what's going on. Now that I've got that, I will write a list of everything that I need to cut out. So I need to add seam allowances to all these measurements. So my seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. So each panel needs 3/8 of an inch on both sides, plus 3/8 of an inch on the ends as well. So my 19 inches becomes 19¾ 19¾ is the width of everything, or how deep the panel is that I cut out. So my first panel, which I need 2 of, one this end, one this end, is 5¾ plus 3/4 at 6½. 6½ times 2. My centre panels here that have the diamond stitching on is 16 inches plus 3/4, so that's 16¾ times 2. And my single centre panel here, 9 inches plus 3/4 is 9¾ 9¾ times 1/2. So that's all my measurements for the seat base top. So my backrest now is 15¼ plus my 2 inches, which is 15, 16, 17¼ plus 3/4, which makes it 18 inches, and it's exactly the same measurements: 2 at 6½, 2 at 16¾ and 1 at 9¾ Now I've got my list, I can get rid of the foams, I don't need them now. Square off the end, 19¾ 39½. So that's all the pieces now drawn out for the faces of the cushions. All I need to do now is to do the borders. Now the borders are just long strips of the fabric. So that's all the pieces now cut out. So I have the four. So I have the 4 panels that I'm going to diamond stitch, the 2 centre pieces and 4 of the outside panels and the borders. The next thing I'm going to do is to form back everything. So I'm going to put 6mm scrimp foam onto the back of the panels that I'm going to stitch, 3mm onto the centre strips and 3mm onto the end pieces. Once I've foamed back everything, I'll draw the diamonds out on the panels that I'm going to stitch and stitch them. Now they're going to have a contrast in stitching. The customer wants them in black, and there's going to be black piping as well. I've now foamed back all the pieces. So what I need to do, I need to find centre. I'll put a line down and then I'll measure from that centre line down and measure out and create a diamond. Now because I've done these in 2-inch increments, I want the diamonds to be 2 inches wide, so then they'll fit nicely within that gap. So centre is 8 3/8. And we have 6, 4, 2, 1, 10, 12, 14, 8 3/8. So diamonds, in my opinion, should be half as wide as they are tall. So I need to mark 8 inches. So I'm just using a normal pencil. I can remove the pencil later with white spirits. I've also marked the 4-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, 16 inches there. I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. 4-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, 16-inch. That's the first one done. I need to now do the same with the other 3. I've now done all the drawing onto the panels. Before I start doing any sewing onto those panels, what I've done is I've made up a little sample here. So this is just the vinyl plus the foam, and I'm just going to make sure the machine is sewing fine on this before I do it on the panels. I don't want to damage a panel if something goes wrong with the machine or the setup's not right for what I'm sewing. Then I have to cut a new panel, draw out all the diamonds again, and that would waste quite a lot of time. So I always make up a little piece like this and just make sure everything's fine with the machine. Now if you've never sewn through vinyl with foam attached before, then I would definitely advise you to do this. Make sure your machine is capable of doing this. Some machines aren't. You might have to make the stitch length a little bit longer than you think, because when you sew through stuff like this, it doesn't sew the same as just a single piece of fabric. So you need to know how it's going to act and the difference, and you also get used to how it sews through. So just have a little play with the machine and just make sure everything's fine and you're happy with doing the sewing. I sew through this stuff all the time. I know my machine will go through it no problem, but I just like to make sure that everything's set up right. So I'm going to start with the smaller panels. And I don't want to put a big back tack when I first start off here. If I put a big back tack there, then potentially it could show. So I've made a small back tack, and when I come to sew the border to this, that will hide the back tack. Not going to cut the thread off. I'm just going to take my time and make sure I'm sewing on the line. Get to the end, small back tack, not cutting the thread. Put a back tack on the end here. I'm just going to leave the needle in, spin the fabric, so I'm going to cut this end off now and start again just here. Small back tack. So this is just a case of just keep going round until all the lines are covered. So I'm now about to cut the base cloth out. This base cloth is a breathable base cloth. I'll leave a link in the description to where I get it from. It comes in black, white, light grey and almond. This is obviously black. I need to use a breathable base cloth because I'm using vinyl for the tops of the cushions. Vinyl isn't breathable, wouldn't let any air into the cushion. Now if you don't have breathability in a cushion, what will happen is you'll sit on a cushion, your weight will force the air out, but then when you get off the cushion, the air won't be able to rush back in, so it will just look flat all the time. Eventually the air will come back in, but it will take a while. Now for whatever reason, if you decide that you're not going to use a breathable base cloth, if you're going to put vinyl on around the whole of the cushion, so top, sides and bottom, then you would have to put some kind of breathability in there. So you have alternatives. You have these, which are the cushion ventilators. You have to put a hole in the back border or underneath the cushion, and you put these in. So this is the outer side, this is the back. They just get pushed together like that. But I would advise just using a breathable base cloth. First job is to square off the end. Now if you remember, the cushion measurement on the length was 52.5 inches. Now normally I would put a 3/8 inch seam allowance both sides. That would make the measurement 53.25. But because it's quite a long cushion and there's some stretch in this base cloth, not a lot but some, I'm only going to do 1/4 inch seam allowance on the width, on the longer side. But on the depth of the cushion, because it isn't that deep, I'm going to use a full seam allowance, and same with the backrest as well. Now if you remember me saying that I'm going to put a strip of fabric along the leading edge of the base cloth, I'm going to sew that straight on top and then put a strip of velcro along the edge that is not going to be part of the seam. You'll understand it better when I come to actually do it. I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to measure my 53 inches, 2/4 inch seam allowances on a 52.5 inch cushion, 19 inches plus my 3/4 for the seam allowances. Most people will put a zip in the back border of a cushion. I generally don't do that. I put a horseshoe zip in, so it just makes life easier for stuff in the cushion. So a horseshoe zip is obviously a horseshoe shape or a C shape or a U shape or whatever you want to call it. I call it a horseshoe zip, and I'll just draw it on so you can see. Now I'm not going to show you sewing the horseshoe zip on because I have a video out already on sewing a horseshoe zip into a base cloth. I'll leave a link in the description to that one. That's everything drawn out now on this. I'm going to cut them out and flip it over on the good side. So I've drawn on the reverse side, always do. That's the base cloth now cut out. So the horseshoe zip will always come from either the back of the cushion or the bottom of the cushion. So this is the backrest, so that is the way up that will sit. So this is the top edge. I'm going to flip it over, so I need to attach a piece of vinyl to this edge here. Now I'm going to tape down the vinyl with double-sided seaming tape. I'm going to put Velcro along this edge. I'm going to hide the edge of the vinyl with Velcro. Now I always sew the loop Velcro two things, and then I'm going to staple the hook Velcro to the actual vehicle. So I'm going to make sure that all these centre panels are running the same way. So we have centre and the ends. Now when I sew the centre panels to the ends and the very centre piece, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sew it so the centre panel is on top. So I know that I'm sewing right up against this edge here where the diamond finishes. They're all together in the correct orientation. If I leave them like this, when I set them over to the sewing machine, when I sew them together, they'll all be correct. That's all the pieces now sewn together for the faces of both cushions. What I'm going to do now is, before I sew the piping on, I need to cut away at the seam allowance that the piping is going to go over. It just makes that seam less bulky, because if you see here on the end, we've obviously got all this foam, all the vinyl, and then we're going to put piping over that and then the border over that. So we're going to have quite a lot of layers to sew over. So it's always easier if I just cut off the end like that. So when I come to sew over here, there's not as much bulk. So I'll do that with just the parts that the piping is going to go over. I'm not bothered so much about the back end. Now I can sew the piping on. Now if you remember the backrest, which is this here, this is gonna actually turn underneath like that there. Now to make that turn a little bit nicer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance where the turn is and cut a V into the seam. So it's a 2-inch cushion plus 1 seam allowance, so that's 2 3/8. So 2 3/8. Just cut a little V. So I'll sew the piping on. I'll also sew the borders, and once I've sewn the borders, I'll bring it back to you and show you the next stage, which is quite an important bit. Now obviously you don't need to have piping on your cushions. If you don't want to, you can just put the borders straight on. So when it comes to sewing the piping on, what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut back the cover to the piping, cut away part of the cord, so I have no piping cord in the end there. Now I'm not going to sew the piping here right to the end. I've measured back the distance where the border is going to be. I put a little cut in here and there, and I'm going to start the piping just on that side of it, about a seam allowance distance, because what I don't want is to have piping on this part here. I want the piping to finish inside the seam of the border. And when I come to sew the piping, I'm not going to stretch the piping. I'm going to keep the piping quite relaxed and just push down on the piping as I'm sewing. Now when I get to the end, to the corner, I'm going to leave the needle in, lift the foot up and put a snip in the piping. I'm going to turn the cover 90 degrees and then pull the piping 90 degrees as well, and then I can continue piping. When it comes to the bit that I've done the diamond stitching on, I'm going to slightly stretch that, only very slightly. Again, same on this corner, needle in, foot up, snip, spin the cover 90 degrees and then pull on the piping and come all the way down. Now when I get to this end, I've done the same. I've cut away a little snip there, cut the piping, expose the cord, snip the cord off, stop the stitch right on that cut, and that's that finished. So obviously I need to do the same with the seat cover, but because the seat cover is not going to have this fold on the bottom of it, the mitred corner, I'm going to bring the piping all the way to the end. I'm now going to sew the border on. This is the backrest that I'm using at the minute. Now the border is going to get sewn on like that, then turned, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to sew it on from here, and then once I've sewn the border on the whole way, I'll come back and do this corner. I'll show you why when I get round to it. So this is my little nick. So I want to put the border 3/8 of an inch further past that dig towards the machine foot and start right on the nick. So I'll put the needle in and then I will start to sew it on. Now I'm going to slightly pull the border, just put some tension on it. Corner, I'm going to leave my needle in, snip into towards the needle, turn the cover 90 degrees just like I did with the piping, pull the border and start to sew again. Again, leave the needle in, foot up, snip, turn, alright, so when I get to here, what I need to do, I need to mark where the nick is on the border, add a seam allowance, and then cut off this bit here. Now this has to be cut at 90 degrees. Mark, and then I can cut this off. So to where the nick is. Turn the border, and that'll bring the piping out with it as well, and then sew down. Now I'm not going to sew this all the way to the end. I'm going to sew it just to there, so a seam allowance away from the end. Back tack. Done. Snip my threads, and then I'm going to snip the corner off. I'm going to rotate the cushion and go back to the beginning where I started. And I'm going to now turn this border, and that will bring the piping with it as well. And I'm going to do the same as I did with the other side, but I'm starting where I finished on the other side. So back tack, and then sew all the way up to my start point on the border, and then snip the threads and cut off the corner. Now the seat cushion, if you remember me saying when I cut everything out that I didn't have enough on the roll to do it in one big piece, so I'm going to start here where this little white mark is. But I'm not actually going to start sewing there. I'm going to move it up a little bit and then start about here. So I need to sew another piece to the end of this. Start here. And sew. Just sew to there for now. Now I have a white mark here. I want to mark the border. Use the square again. Square off. Cut off the excess. Now I need to attach the second piece of border to the first piece of border. Together. And then I can continue sewing the border on. Now when I get to the join, I'm going to open up the seams and sew them open like that. This is exactly the same as before. It just doesn't have piping on it now. So when I get to here, I'm going to open up the seam. The boards have now been sewn onto both cushions. Next thing I need to do is to mark the corners. So I'm going to work corner to corner when I sew these onto the bases. So I'm going to bring the borders both in together and wait till they touch. So they should touch just once they've touched, they've formed this corner here. I'm going to pinch that, all that out like that, and then that is my corner. I'm going to put a little snip in it just like that. So I've got a little snip there in the corner, and that corner should line up with the corner here. Do the same on the rest. You'll be able to feel it if it's not in the right position. It'll kind of form a twist and it won't be easy to fold, but when it's in the right position it's quite easy to fold, and then just snip. Now on the backrest I've only got 2 corners. Well, I've actually got 4, but 2 are already marked because of the way I've sewn the border together here. The next job is to sew all these to the bases. Now I'll get the bases out. I'm going to put the base down onto the bed of the machine, tops onto the bases. I'm going to start on one corner. I'm going to work from corner to corner. I'll sew one side first, then the long end, then the short side, and then the bottom. Now when I come to sew the short sides, quite easy to just grab one side, grab the corner and sew it in. When I come to do the long side, I'm going to have to do the same, but I'm going to work in sections. But I'll show you that when I start doing it. So I'm going to put the fabric right on the corner of the base cloth, put the needle in just there where I finished off the last seam, and then just start to sew. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the corner that I've nicked in here, and I'm going to offer that up to the corner of the base cloth here. Make sure it's in the right position, so a seam allowance away from the end, and I'm just going to hold both pieces together and just sew one straight line. Get to the corner, leave the needle in. So I've already got a nick on the border from when I actually marked where the corners were. I'm going to spin the whole cover 90 degrees, sew a little bit, just a couple of inches, leave the needle in, and I'm going to go to the end, right to the corner, and do the same. So I'll find the corner that I've nicked in on the border, offer it up to the base cloth and pull it tight, and find middle roughly and work to that middle point. Keep checking as I go along. Make sure you leave your needle in, then the fabric can't move along with it. And then when I get to the corner, leave the needle again, lift the foot up, spin everything 90 degrees, just like before, and again, work from corner to corner. I'm just going to do the bottom seam just as a separate seam. I'm going to snip the corners off. That just gets rid of any bulk on the corner. So, undo the zip. Make sure when you turn things inside out that you push the corners out properly. And because we've got this massive horseshoe zip in the base, this just becomes very easy. If we had a zip just down one end, everything would be a little bit harder at this point now. Because we've got this massive zip, everything becomes very easy. So that's all my corners pushed out. So I'm just going to place the foam inside, but before I put the foam in, I'm going to spray the foam with silicone spray. That just helps the foam slide in. In fact, no, I'm not. I'm going to wad the cushion first. Now you can get away without wadding cushions because I've got this screen foam on the back of each panel. But wadding just makes it a little bit nicer. It allows the foam, it allows the seams to sit inside the wadding. Otherwise the seams get pushed out by the foam a little bit. So put this to one side. So this is wadding. It is just 6-ounce wadding. You can buy it in thinner, you can buy it in thicker. 6 ounce is just an average thickness really. I'm going to cut the wadding off to size now, glue it in place, trim it afterwards, and then I'll stuff the cushion. So I'm going to spray my scissors with silicone spray. That just stops the glue from sticking to the scissors, makes life a little bit easier. I'm just going to run the scissors up against the side of the foam and just cut the wadding off. So that's one cushion wadded already. I'll do the same with the other one, obviously, but I'll do that off camera. I'm going to stuff the seat cushion and then you can see it. Now, stuffing this cushion becomes very easy with the horseshoe zip inside. I'm just going to place the foam on top of the cover. I'm going to grab the corner, put that corner in, grab the other corner, that corner in, give it a little bit of a push, the other corner in, and for the last corner I'm just going to grab the foam, pull it back, bend it under So that's all the corners in. I need to make sure now they're actually in the corner properly. I'm just going to pull the foam and manipulate it so it sits in the corner correctly on all four corners. I'm going to make sure all the piping on the seams are turned the same way. It will be noticeable if you don't turn the seams, and then zip it up and that cushion will be stuffed. So much easier than trying to fight a zip down the side and trying to get the cushion in. You've got to put your arms inside there and try and adjust the foam, whereas this I've got access quite easily to all the corners, all the edges, and I can just work on it quite simply. So what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing the corner here and just put both hands in, and I can make sure that corner of the foam is put right into the corner of the cover. Same on the other side, put both hands in quite easily, grab the foam and push it straight into the corner of the cover. That corner is in there really nicely anyway. And that's in really nice. So I'm just going to run my hands inside, make sure all the seams are turned. Yep, all fine. So I'll spin the cushion around, grab the base cloth. I'm going to pull on the foam, so I'm going to pull the foam towards me, use my body to actually rest this end against. I'm just going to pull the foam in a little bit, pull the cover and start to zip. I'm just going to work my way around. That cushion is stuffed. Just going to bend it a little bit over the bench. I don't want the cushion to turn up like that, I'd rather it turn down. So I need to do the same with the backrest cushion, and those cushions will be done. So that's both cushions now completed. If you remember me saying about the backrest cushion, why I turned the face underneath this one so this flowed underneath, and exactly what it does, and you don't have a visible line from a border. If you found that video useful, give it the old thumbs up, and I hope you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye.